You may have noticed that this floor is a little slanted. They built this over a carport, so everything is a little bit this way. So, just in case you thought there was something funny in the drinks, it's actually the floor, it's not you. So, I'm excited. I'm just going to quickly show you a picture of my family so you can ooh and ah. Kimberly already said. There we go. Mike, stand in front of me. We actually started out as Baptist pastors, and then on November 3rd, 20 years ago, we left the pastorate to join YWAM. So tomorrow was our 20th anniversary in the mission. We work mostly in Southeast Asia. We spent the better part of the last 20 years traveling around Southeast Asia, doing a lot of evangelism, leading teams, a lot of training, a lot of leadership development, and then for 8 years we lived in Fiji in the South Pacific as national leaders for our organization and worked in leadership for the Pacific region. But 3 years ago, God called us back to Canada, and I was quite interested to come back to Canada because my heart is really here in Canada. And having started out as a Baptist pastor, I've had a real soft spot for church in Canada. And for years, I've been kind of watching to see the news stories coming out of Canada and hearing testimonies and other things. So when God called us to come back to Canada, I was really quite excited because I believe that God is going to do something new and amazing here in Canada. And so it's I'm going to talk to you guys quickly about the Great Commission and our job to fulfill the Great Commission. Now, I'm not going to take a long time talking about this. Every single one of you, your number one job is to fulfill the Great Commission, to preach the gospel. And even City Serve, talking about their mission statement, it's to help you preach the gospel. And so I think it's kind of exciting because I'm a big picture sort of guy. I like to know what's happening all over the place. And so I'm just going to take 2 minutes and talk about a conference we had a number of years ago. When I became a Christian and went to university or to Bible school in the 90s, they were talking about how it was a humongous task for the church to fulfill the Great Commission. At that time, different speakers would say 18,000 people groups around the world, 20,000 people groups around the world. And all these different numbers were swirling around in my head. And then when I became a YWAM missionary, I thought, man, this is a humongous task for us to reach all of the different people groups. And so we went to a staff conference in Kansas City in 2016, and I was really excited because some YWAM senior staff had formed a research team to figure out exactly how many unreached people groups are left in the world. The last I had heard were those numbers, like 18,000, 20,000. I'd been on different websites. There were similar numbers. But the YWAM research team gathered the 5 largest missions organizations in the world: YWAM, Wycliffe, Cru, World Vision, Southern Baptist Missions, and they got their senior leaders to work together and to open up all their records and to go nation by nation and people group by people group to figure out who in the world still needs to hear the gospel and what's happening. So YWAM might be very active there, but not here, but Cru is there, or Wycliffe. And so they collated all of their results. And they came up with a pretty amazing answer. Anybody want to guess how many people groups are left in the world that don't have a self-sustaining church? Take a wild guess.
5,000.
5,000.
200.
200. I was going to tease you and not give you the number, but I thought, oh, that'd be so mean. It was 633. 633 people groups left in the world, according to the top 5 missions organizations. And they actually gave every single one of us a printed out list of the 633. So I have that in my files. So it was incredible. Yeah. So
that
only
was 2016.
And that was 2016. So unengaged people groups. So, okay. But I want to focus some time here in Canada. Where are we in Canada? What's happening in Canada? This presentation is going to go pretty fast. It's going to be furious. At the beginning, you're going to be ha, ha, ha. And then you're going to go, wait a minute. And then you're going to probably look like this. I'm hoping we get to this. But we'll see. I'm going to go pretty fast. Brief history of Canada. You know that Canada's been inhabited for a long time. Lots of people make claims to who actually came here first. We're famous around the world. Everybody knows we invented ice hockey. We also invented, Hawaiian pizza, peanut butter, basketball, Wonder Bra. I'm not quite sure what that is, but... and then of course, everybody knows Tim Hortons, Justin Bieber. I was shocked, you guys. I was out of the country for 8 years, and when I came back, they had like Bieber coffee. This blew my mind. Anyway, we also say sorry a lot. Religious history of Canada. When the Europeans started coming here in the last wave, on September 3rd, there was a chaplain on a group of ships that were trying to go through the Northwest Passage. And they had hit some storms, lost some people, and they came to shore and they decided to have a service, a Holy Eucharist service. And so it was an Anglican chaplain, and this was the first recorded Christian service in Canada on September 3rd, 1578. The first church was a Catholic chapel in St. John's. They're not sure of the exact date, but in 1698, so way over on the East Coast on St. John's. Confederation happened in what year? Who's a good Canadian? What year was Confederation?
1867.
1867. Well, in 1871, they did their first census to figure out how many people live in the country and whether they are, what's their faith, what's their religion. Sorry, am I blocking you guys? And so they figured out that in 1871 that we were 99.26% Christian, which is kind of funny because there was two options. You could either identify as Christian or pagan. So, so some people did identify as pagan. Now the question for us as we kind of go through this talk is how do you figure out who's a Christian? Like what's the measurement that you would take? So for a sports fan, how do you know if somebody's a real sports fan? What if they wear a Winnipeg Jets cap? Are they a sports fan?
No.
Would you say they're sports fan? Love that answer. Would they have
They've been
to?
cheering for the Leafs for the past 60 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
How many games would they have to go to before you say they're a fan? What if they never went to a game but only watched TV? What if they only went to playoff games? What if they only went when somebody else gave them free tickets? Like, you go, oh man, I don't know what a sports fan is now. That's kind of a tough question. So same in Christianity. Like when a researcher gets down to it and tries to figure out who is Christian, what's happening with Christianity, what are the measurements? I liked it a few years ago when all the Christians identified with the WWJD. I mean, that was handy. Like, show your bracelet. 1, 2, 3. That was easy. None of you have them, I notice. Or maybe some of you have a tattoo or something. A couple of years ago when I started doing research, there was three main ways that people will measure Christianity: affiliation, attendance, and values. Now the first one, affiliation, the government of Canada really likes this one because they do their national survey every 10 years, and it's been on there since the very beginning, questions about religion. And so they ask about affiliation, and they just simply ask the question, what religion are you? And so you see the numbers going back to 2001, 77.1% of Canadians would put up their hand and say, well, I'm Christian. They'd say, I'm Christian. And that number, since they do the survey every 10 years, it's been dropping. So 77, 67, 53. So 53% of people in Canada simply identify as Christian. It just says they are. And this is a challenge because it might be that their parents went to an Anglican church, and so they think they should identify as Christian. And so it's probably not the most reliable way to measure. And most people that look at Christian, figures and statistics don't rely on affiliation. I should mention that it was 10,070 people identify as Jedis. In 2021, we had 10,000 something Jedis among us. And can you be a Christian and a Jedi? Is that? And you guys have probably heard, this is one of my favorite quotes from, oh come on, what's his name? Mark Twain. He says there's 3 types of lies in the world. There's lies, damned lies, and statistics. So you got to watch how you use statistics. Okay, so next way that we can measure Christianity is by church attendance. And so I looked at a lot of different sources. I think one of the most reliable ones that has obviously spent the most time at it, and I think has the best methods, is Dr. Bibby. Some of you might know him as a sociologist from Lethbridge, Alberta. He's been doing this since the 80s, and he would simply ask, have you been to church in the last 4 weeks? Or do you attend church once a month on average or more? Well, in 1985, the national average was 42%. Last time he did it in 2021, it was down to 20%. Now, he is forecasting, he's done this study and other studies, he is forecasting that we will be at 4% in the year 2100. Now, some of us go, that's a long ways away. That's one generation. That's one generation from here. Those are your grandkids who will live in a country that has 4% of people. Now, to help you understand, that is the same as Saudi Arabia today. That's the same as Saudi Arabia today. So in one generation, we will have the percentage Christian population as Saudi Arabia. So definitely on the down. Another way that we can measure Christianity is through values. And so this simply asks, does your faith influence your life decisions? It's one thing to say, I am Christian, but it's a very different thing to actually do something about that. Choices in your life and your values. I'm not going to take a lot of time. This one's very subjective because we all have slightly different values, and we probably would disagree on what all the Christian values are. But one measurement that I have really noticed, I was outside of Canada for 8 years. I came back once in 8 years, and then we came here to live. And one of the things that really shocked me was MAID, the medical assistance in dying. And there's different numbers out there. The BBC quoted numbers from the Canadian government, actually where it says 2.5%, the last time I saw from this report it was actually 3.3%. That's for the Canadian average, but here on Vancouver Island, 7.5% of deaths are medical suicides. Basically government-funded suicides. And I mean, there's different social values that we could discuss. This is just one that I'm going to throw out there. But for me, as a Canadian, coming back to Canada after 8 years, this was a shocking one. And to see the numbers for Vancouver Island, it's like, wow. What is happening with values here on Vancouver Island? Every report, every statistic is going down. It's on the decline. It's on the negative. Anglican Church of Canada had a synod meeting, their big national staff conference 2019. Their leader for the nation stood up and gave a report and said, we will cease to exist in the year 2040. Their own reports and statistics, Anglican Church of Canada will cease to exist in 2040. They were the largest denomination in Canada after the Catholics for the longest time, and by their own admission they will cease to exist. United Church of Canada is the largest Protestant denomination in Canada. So from 2011 to 2021 they have lost 40%. 40%, or roughly 800,000 members. 800,000 members. When I travel outside of Canada, I'm very involved with our organization on an international level. I travel international teaching in Asia and leadership meetings around the world. I often get asked this question, is Canada a Christian nation? Is Canada a Christian nation? We produce very few Christian leaders, very few missionaries, very funding of Christian missions has gone down in Canada, and so people say, "Are you guys Christian there? Like, what's going on in your country?" So So a couple of years ago, when I started working on my master's, the question that I had was, what's causing this? My heart was broken when I looked at those numbers, that we are going to be 4% or fewer Christian in one generation. I thought, okay, somebody has to start to think about this. This is a big question. This is a very important question. And so, and because it was a master's, it had to be academic. And I was glad, because I didn't want conjecture, theories, gossip. I wanted it to be supported by numbers, facts, surveys. And so I was really, you guys probably don't realize this, but I think every single one of your churches is a member of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, has put some serious thought into this. Of course, Dr. Bibby, Barna Group, Statistics Canada, wasn't that helpful, but I used it. And I should mention Alpha Canada has actually partnered with a few others and come up with some really good reports. So Alpha Canada was really helpful. So what's causing the decline in Christianity? I mean, the short, easy answer is it's just a lack of new believers. And lack of new believers. We are aging out. We are aging out. The average Christian in Canada is a white woman, 55 years and older. 85% of Canadians born in the 40s, 50s, they report that they are Christian. Now, you compare that to millennials, we're at 13%. A sudden and drastic change. Yeah. So one of the questions that I had to grapple with is, well, if we just don't have new believers, well, why is that? Well, again, the answer is right in front of us. People just simply do not do evangelism. People do not engage in evangelism. I won't bore you with the details. Put a lot of work into this for the last 2 years. We actually traveled across Canada twice, meeting with pastors and looking for people doing evangelism, attended seminars, trainings, did all of the reports. And I'm going to quickly mention the 4 enemies of evangelism, the 4 things that stop us. I think the first 2 you could all guess. The first 2 are pretty obvious. First is fear. A lot of Christians just don't do it because they're afraid. They're just afraid. They don't have confidence. They're not quite sure what's going to happen. And they are just simply nervous to go out there, and so that just stops them. For a huge majority of people, they just don't do it out of fear. Second one is they're afraid of other people's worldview. And what happens if someone says, well, that's true for you, but not for me? Well, I don't believe the Bible, or what about this? And they just aren't prepared to answer those questions. So it's training and confidence and having a solid biblical Christian worldview. So now the next 2 will probably surprise you. I was really discouraged when I dug down deeper. This was Alpha Canada and the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada did a report. They surveyed 2,400 Christian leaders from across Canada, found out that a full 31% of them feel it is wrong to do evangelism. Not that they don't do it, that's a much bigger number, but 31% of them will actively teach against evangelism. Now, this is the average for all of them. When they break it down to age groups, when you look at youth pastors and people under 30, this number is more like 54% will not engage in evangelism, will not encourage evangelism, think it's wrong. The last enemy of evangelism is confusion about what the gospel is. I've sat down with numerous deacons, elders, different Christian workers, and then people from churches, and did a year's worth of surveys and researched other surveys. And when you ask them what is the gospel, almost nobody has a clear understanding, or they have an untrue or incomplete understanding of the gospel. So you might want to say, well, get out there and do evangelism. They won't. They're afraid, they don't have this solid biblical Christian worldview, and they also don't know what they're talking about. It's sad but true. I was a Baptist pastor for years. Many of our supporters are pastors and family members, and I'll sit with them, and they just can't come up with where they can't tell me what the gospel is. Question?
I've had it said to me, because I've talked with some young adults in my own church, and I brought to them these statistics that you just shared this morning, especially from Alpha. And the impression that I get from them is it's not that they don't believe in evangelism, it's they don't believe in the kind of evangelism they're seeing south of the border and what they perceive on by the televangelists and the fundamentalists movements in the States.
Yeah.
So is there any kind of that thought here in Canada too in your studies?
None of it showed up in the research, but I mean, all the research that I looked at was mostly 2020 and before. I know that thought and attitude has really come to the front. It would be interesting for somebody to look at that, because I hear that now, but it wasn't in research. Yeah. I'm zooming through here, fast and furious. So one thing that was obvious is whatever we're doing isn't working. Whatever we are doing as church in Canada is not working. Makes me think of Albert Einstein, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I'm going to give us a bit of, remember those pictures where I showed you like smiling and then getting, we're kind of at that low point now. Okay, we're going to try to pop it up a little bit here. A little bit of glimmer of hope. And I say glimmer because this is good news, but it's not going to save us. First interesting thing that the research showed.
Only Jesus.
Only Jesus. Only one segment. So in our different denominations, different brands of Christianity, only one is growing. Only one is growing. Now it's interesting, when you look at the raw numbers, you'll go, wait a minute, there's like 6 or 7 denominations that are growing. Like, you'd go like the Baptists. The Baptists grew 5.3% in that decade. You'd go, hey, that's growth. Problem is that the population of Canada is growing faster than the church is growing. So even though, I kind of tease Baptists a lot because I was Baptist, we always attend Baptist churches. Even though they grew 5.3%, the Canadian population grew just over 9%, so they actually lost ground. They lost ground. If they had another 8,562 members, they would have stayed even, but they didn't, so that statistically they dropped. They had a net loss. So there were several denominations in Canada that had numbers. Actually, Baptists were one of the best. Most churches in Canada would report growth of 2 or 3%. So they had much bigger losses. Baptists actually did one of the best. Any guesses on which group of churches did the best? Pentecostal. 33%. Yeah. Pentecostal, and now this is not just PAOC, this is charismatic. And this is a good news, bad news situation. It's really exciting that they're seeing that growth, but they are 0.8% of people in Canada. So they would have to grow at 33% for many, many years before it makes any statistical difference. So even though we were excited for it, and it's like, wow, they're doing something right, at 0.8%, it's not going to have too much of a difference. Other group, it's not one denomination, but churches that serve in a significant way in their community, and this is across denominations, see fairly significant church growth. When I say significant church growth, 15 to 20%. But it's when they have significant impact in their community. And I don't mean just a food bank once a month. This is like people that tackle like issues of education, homelessness, violence, drug addiction, fatherlessness, the big ones in a significant way. Not a once a year event, but when they are weekly engaged in tackling these issues, those churches will see significant growth. And incidentally, the community will really appreciate them and know that they are there by name. So they're the other group that is seeing significant growth. So, Christian and Canada, just in conclusion, what I really want to, when I was thinking to myself and preparing for this meeting, I thought, what do I want this group of pastors in Victoria to understand? And it sounds kind of negative, but the first thing is that whatever we are doing, and I include myself in that, is YWAM. YWAM has really plateaued and shrunk in Canada in the last 20 years. Whatever we are doing, it's not working. We are beyond the tweak. I think the most discouraging thing for me is when I go visit a pastor and they said, oh, we got a new drum set. We got new greeter training. or new posters on the wall. That's tweaking. That tweaking is going to do nothing. We are so far past the point of tweaking things. I like this, the times they are changing. I wish I could sing that for you guys.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. That'd be the worst meeting ever if I sang that. But things are changing. It would be a whole nother talk for us to go through what it means generationally and culturally in this nation. In our organization, for the last 2 years, every international meeting I go to is about the generations and about the major shift that's happened and the disconnect that has happened between us, YWAM, and we are youth with a mission. I mean, if anybody should be on top of youth culture, it should be us. But we are falling behind. We are playing catch up right now to what's happening with youth culture around the world. There's some really promising things happening, and I think that God has given us some really important strategies to follow, but the times are changing. And with that, we need brave leaders. We need leaders that are going to face the facts and say, whoa, something's got to happen, and it's got to happen with me. I want to just quickly talk about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You all know him, German theologian, pastor. He became ordained in 1931, Lutheran Church in Germany. He was 2 years after he became ordained, the Nazi Party became the ruling government in Germany, and they asked the Lutheran Church to pass something called the Aryan Paragraph, which said that Jews were subhuman. They couldn't be in leadership, they couldn't have membership, and they couldn't have a lot of the things that the regular people could have. Basically, it was the beginning of their systemic racism and the beginning of the Holocaust. The German government went to the Lutheran Church because they knew they were incredibly powerful and influential, and they highly encouraged them to accept the Aryan Paragraph, and they did. The government told the church what to do. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was so upset that he broke away from them, formed a radical group of people that fought against the Aryan Paragraph. He's got this incredible story. But at the end of his life, just a few months before he was killed by the Nazis, he was in prison, and he wrote a series of essays. And it was really interesting because in one of the essays, he predicted that it was the end of Christianity as they knew it in Germany. He says the church's job was to follow Christ and biblical values and stand up for righteousness. And the church caved in on all three things. And so he says God is going to start a new form of church. And he actually dedicated several essays at the end of his life examining what Christianity could look like. But he said the moment that the church capitulates to the government and begins to follow the world, that church is done. And we need to start something new. And so I think we need new leaders in Christianity in Canada that will re-examine what does it mean to be Christian, what does it mean to be church. Yep.
Well, I'd like to challenge your term of evangelism.
Sure.
And I really appreciate all the work you did with the statistics and everything, but there's a resistance inside of me, and I know the spirit about numbers. And working in a secular organization, the university, if we look at numbers, it's not what it's about. And in fact, evangelism has a different flavor for every individual Christian. And it does say make disciples and go out. So if I was to challenge anybody, including myself, it's to create community and be in relationship with yourself and God, with your family, with your neighborhood, with your brothers and sisters in your local community, with the community at wide, and develop relationship. Because I have that same thing about evangelism where it's like, coming out of the 70s, like, no, don't hand me a pamphlet.
Yeah.
All of that's garbage. And if I want to be an evangelist, I am. Whether I choose to be or not, how I am and who I am and how I present myself, how I help others, I'm evangelizing, because as soon as they know I believe in Christ, and they'll find that out pretty soon, I'm evangelizing whether I think so or not. But what I have to realize, it's not me. What I do releases God, releases His Spirit to work in others. And I may just be the one that shoves that soil aside.
Yeah.
She may be the one that comes along and plants a seed. Somebody else pushes that seed, that soil down in other waters. Like, I have to let go.
Yeah.
This is not my show. This is His.
Yeah.
And so I really challenge, not you, but the general thing. I know we've been in meetings before. Where's Grant? We've talked about numbers and all that. It's not the only way, because that's not the way the early church started, pretty darn small.
Yeah. Well, thanks. No, thanks for sharing. I know that we're interdenominational, and our organization is interdenominational. So I steer away from having a really narrow definition of gospel or evangelism. In fact, I didn't give a definition of either. So because there are many people that would say that's definitely a huge part of evangelism. At the same time, early church did have numbers, didn't they? Didn't they give statistics? Okay.
In your studies, Adam, I
Yep.
know, because we're in this discussion in our own fellowship. I'm a PAOC pastor myself.
Yeah.
We're hearing studies out of the Assemblies of God in the States. In the Assemblies of God, right now, they are the largest evangelical denomination, or the fastest growing, but they're also first to admit that their growth primarily is through immigration and new Americans. In your studies, have you also been finding that, where our growth in our churches has been, a lot of it has been first Canadians coming?
If we had another 10 minutes, I would have given a little preach on that, because the people, the newest churches and the fastest growing churches right now are all immigrant. It's such a small percentage of Canada, but they are the ones that are growing, and there's three, I think, really important reasons why they are, and I think us mainstream guys need to learn from those immigrant churches. But yeah, for sure, same is true in Canada. Statistically, it's small, but it is important. Okay, I'm aware of time, so I don't want to take your time. My last point, and I think it's related to, sorry, what was your name?
Angela.
Angela. I like what Angela brought up, and this is my last thing, is like, what is the gospel? What is the gospel? And I think that it's a very worthwhile conversation about what is the gospel, what is evangelism, and to really dig deep on this. And put some effort into it, because people just simply, you see in this conversation, there will be different opinions. So, but we know that it is incredibly important to do. I'll finish with this. I won't go into the whole story, but when Canada was founded, when they were meeting over in England about what to call this new nation of Canada, they settled on it being the Dominion of Canada, and there was a member of Parliament from Nova Scotia who shared this verse from his morning devotions with all of the politicians, where it says that he shall have dominion also from sea to sea. And so after that point, they decided to call it the Dominion of Canada. And so that's my prayer for us, that this would once again become the Dominion of Canada. So if I could just take 30 seconds to pray for you. I know I opened a can of worms. I know I gave you, I thought, Lord, how do I go into this? Am I a doctor that says you'll be all right? Or am I the doctor that rips off the bandage quickly? Get the pain over with. And so, yeah. Anyway.
Can I just, the last verse of the original O Canada, which got dropped, this last verse, and just as a preamble to your prayer, Ruler supreme, who hearest humble prayer, hold our dominion within thy loving care. Help us to find, O God, in thee a lasting rich reward, as waiting for the better day we ever stand on guard.
Beautiful. Yeah. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you are good. Thank you that you love us. Thank you for this nation of Canada. We thank you for the First Nations people that you put here before us. Thank you for their place in society. May it be honored and lifted up. And Lord, as we, your people, do our best to love you, to love others, to serve you and to serve others, that you would be the one to lead us and to guide us. Lord, help us in our conversations, help us in our leadership. Reveal your plan for this nation so that we could follow your leading. I thank you for every single person in this room and their relationship with you and the way that they seek after you and love you well. So I bless them. Thank you for this time. Amen. Okay. Thank you. I'm willing for more conversations. If you want more statistics, if you want simply how can you help with starting this conversation, I'd love to be a part of that. And gospel training is one of the main things that we do. So if you've got people in your church that are interested in this conversation, give us a shout and we'd love to engage in that. Okay, blessings to you guys.
Thanks, Adam.